My name is Sophia Bennett, and if you'd asked me a year ago what I meant to my family, I would have said, not much. I wasn't the daughter they were proud of. I wasn't the one they bragged about at dinner parties. That was my older sister, Cassandra. She was beautiful, brilliant, and polished in every way that made our parents glow with pride. She went to an Ivy League school, married well, walked into the family business with ease. Cassandra was the future of the Bennett name, and my parents adored her for it. Me? I was the other one. The one who rented a tiny apartment in the city, painted until 3 a.m, worked odd jobs to scrape by. I was the disappointment, the impractical dreamer. They never said it out loud, but the message was always clear. Cassandra was their empire, and I was their embarrassment. When my grandfather passed away, the man who had built the Bennett fortune from the ground up, I knew the will reading wouldn't be kind to me. I went into that dark paneled office, expecting to sit quietly while Cassandra was handed everything, and I would leave with nothing but the familiar sting of being overlooked. The lawyer's voice filled the room, calm and deliberate, as he began. To Cassandra Bennett, he listed the Newport mansion, the trust that funded it, and $8 million in liquid assets. My mother's eyes lit up with pride. My father nodded like the world was unfolding exactly as it should. Cassandra didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. She had won. Then the lawyer shifted to Sophia Bennett. For a second, my heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But then he continued. An envelope to be opened in private, at her discretion. That was it. An envelope. No money, no property, just paper. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cassandra looked at me with the faintest trace of a smirk. My mother looked down at her hands, and my father, never one to let humiliation pass quietly, stood up and said, Sophia has always needed to learn responsibility. Perhaps this is Richard's final reminder. My face burned, my palms shook. I wanted to scream, but the words were stuck in my throat. I sat frozen, until the others left, their voices fading down the hall. That's when the attorney slid the envelope across the table toward me. This was prepared in confidence, he said softly. Your grandfather was deliberate. I tore it open with trembling fingers, bracing myself for another dismissal. But instead, I found his handwriting, uneven but steady, every word striking deeper than the last. He wrote about me, not Cassandra, not the business. Me, he wrote about how he had seen me painting when I thought no one was watching. How I reminded him of my grandmother, who had once been an artist herself before her dreams were swallowed by the family's obsession with money. And then came the revelation. For 20 years, my grandfather had been quietly collecting art, a hidden collection worth more than $25 million. Every single piece was left to me, along with a gallery downtown and an apartment above it. It was all mine, protected, legally airtight. My parents and Cassandra couldn't touch it. You are my legacy, Sophia, the letter read. Not because of wealth, but because you see the world as it could be, not just as it is. I sat in that chair, the letter shaking in my hands, my heart racing so loud I could hear it in my ear. All the years of being dismissed, overlooked, compared, and now the truth was staring me in the face. I had never been less. I had just been hidden. And with one sealed envelope, my grandfather had not only changed my future, he had set fire to everything my family thought they knew. I didn't realize it yet, but this wasn't just an inheritance. It was a declaration of war. When I left the lawyer's office that day, the envelope still clutched in my hands. My chest felt like it was going to split open. I wanted to cry, scream, laugh, everything at once. I'd spent years being treated like a mistake, and suddenly I was holding proof that someone had seen me all along. Not just seen me, but believed in me enough to leave me something priceless. But the relief didn't last long, because the moment I walked into my parents' house later that evening, it was clear the atmosphere had shifted. My mother's smile was too tight. My father's voice was clipped, and Cassandra, she didn't even bother pretending. Her eyes flicked to the envelope like it was a loaded weapon in my hands. So, she said casually, sipping her wine, what was in your little letter? I swallowed hard. It's private. Cassandra laughed. Not loudly, but in that cruel, dismissive way she'd perfected since we were kids. Come on, Sophia. You know there's no such thing as privacy in this family. Tell us. What was it? Some sentimental trinket? A diary? A recipe card? Her husband chuckled, and my mother smirked. My father just waited, expectant, like I was a child caught hiding something behind my back. Every muscle in my body screamed to keep quiet, to protect what I had just discovered. But I was still me, still desperate for them to see me, to finally take me seriously. So, with my heart hammering, I said, "He left me the gallery." The silence that followed was like glass shattering. My mother's smile vanished, my father's brow tightened. Cassandra's lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "What did you say?" she whispered. I forced myself to meet her eyes. Grandpa left me his art collection, and the gallery, and the apartment above it, all of it. The room erupted. My mother set her glass down, so hard it cracked. "That doesn't make any sense," she snapped. "Why would he leave something of that scale to you?" Cassandra's voice was sharp, venomous. "That gallery is worth more than the mansion." She stood, her face red. "This is ridiculous. You're lying." I pulled the letter from my bag and slid it across the table. "I'm not lying. Read it yourself." Watching Cassandra's face as she skimmed the words was like watching her lose oxygen. Her jaw tightened, her grip on the paper so fierce I thought she might tear it. "This is fraud," she spat. "It has to be. Someone manipulated him. Sophia, you can't even manage your rent, and suddenly you're supposed to manage a multi-million-dollar gallery." She laughed bitterly. "You're a joke. You've always been a joke." Her words stung, but for the first time in my life, they didn't cut me down. Not completely, because the letter in her hands said otherwise. My father spoke then, his voice calm but heavy with warning. "Sophia, if you truly cared about this family, you'd transfer ownership of that gallery to Cassandra. It belongs with the person who can handle it." "I can handle it," I said, more firmly than I thought I could. My voice didn't shake this time. "He gave it to me, and I'm not giving it away." The look my parents exchanged in that moment was chilling. A silent conversation, one I wasn't invited to. My mother finally stood, her voice cold. "You're making a mistake. This family has carried you long enough. Don't think you can suddenly walk in with power you don't deserve." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my hands trembling under the table. But inside me, beneath the fear, something else was sparking, a defiance I'd never let myself feel before. That night, when I got back to my tiny apartment, I reread the letter over and over, until I could hear my grandfather's voice in every word. And then I cried. Tears of grief, of relief, of something else I couldn't even name. But by morning I knew one thing for certain. Cassandra and my parents weren't going to let this go, not without a fight. And I had no idea just how far they were willing to go to take back what my grandfather had given me. The following week was chaos. Every time my phone buzzed, it was another call from my mother or father, each one more aggressive than the last. At first, it was guilt, reminders of how much they had done for me, how much I owed them. When that didn't work, it turned into manipulation. "Think of the family's reputation, Sophia. You don't know what you're doing. Cassandra's the one who can keep the Bennett legacy alive." But by day 3, the tone had shifted. It was no longer about guilt. It was about threats. My father warned me about the cost of upkeep, the taxes, the inevitable collapse if I tried to handle it alone. "You'll drown, Sophia," he said, his voice flat. "And when you do, don't expect us to save you." The strange thing was, beneath all the intimidation, I could hear the panic. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't prepared for me to have something they couldn't control. When I finally walked into the gallery for the first time, keys trembling in my hand, I understood why. It wasn't just a building. It was a cathedral of art. White walls stretched high above me, lights spilling down from skylights, paintings lined in careful perfection. Some pieces I recognized instantly, classics worth millions. Others were unfamiliar but breathtaking, each one signed with a name I'd later learn my grandfather had personally championed when no one else believed in them. And then, tucked away in the back office, I found the document. Not only had he left me the gallery and the collection, but he'd transferred the deed to the building, set up an untouchable trust to cover operating costs, and left a list of trusted contacts who had been waiting for me. Waiting for me. It felt surreal. For once in my life, someone had thought I was worthy of something this big. But while I stood there trying to take it all in, Cassandra was already plotting. That evening, she showed up unannounced at my apartment. She didn't knock. She pounded on the door until my neighbors peeked out from their units. When I opened it, she swept past me without a word, heels clicking against the cheap laminate floor. Her perfume filled the space, sharp and suffocating. She turned to me with eyes that glittered like knives. "You're going to sign it over?" I laughed, though my throat was dry. "No, I'm not." Her voice was low, dangerous. "You think you've won, Sophia? You think one old man's sentiment changes who you are? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. And now you're in possession of something you can't possibly handle." She leaned closer, her breath hot against my cheek. "You'll fail. And when you do, I'll be there to take it all." For the first time, I didn't flinch. I met her, stare, and said, "Grandpa, thought differently. That's enough for me." Her jaw clenched. She stayed frozen there for a moment, before pulling her bag tighter to her shoulder and storming out, the door slamming so hard the frame rattled. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 days later, I received a letter from a lawyer, their lawyer. My parents and Cassandra were contesting the will, claiming my grandfather had been mentally compromised in his final year. They wanted the gallery, the collection, the apartment, all of it, declared invalid. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hands, fury boiling beneath my skin. They weren't just trying to take what was mine. They were trying to erase me. Again. But this time I wasn't the same Sophia who used to stay silent. This time I had something worth fighting for. And if my family wanted a war, I was ready to give them one. The day of the first hearing, I remember sitting in the courthouse lobby, clutching the leather portfolio Mr. Lawson, my attorney, had given me. My palms were damp, my stomach a knot. Across the room, Cassandra sat perfectly composed in a navy suit, her husband William whispering something in her ear. My parents sat beside them, heads held high, like royalty presiding over a trial. When Cassandra caught my eye, she smirked. Not a wide grin, just a tiny curve of her lips that said, "This is already mine." The doors opened, and we filed inside. The judge was stern, no nonsense. He began by acknowledging my grandfather's will, the airtight clauses, the video recordings Richard Bennett had left confirming his intentions. But still, my family's lawyer argued relentlessly, painting me as unstable, irresponsible, incapable of managing an estate of this size. It was humiliating. Hearing my own parents describe me as immature, directionless, and ill-prepared was like being gutted in front of strangers. I felt my throat close, my chest burning. But then Mr. Lawson stood, calm, deliberate. He produced document after document. Medical records proving my grandfather was of sound mind. Testimonies from his doctors. Even a notarized video where he said, "Clear as day, I know exactly what I'm doing. This is for Sophia, and no one else." For a moment, the room was silent. My father's jaw tightened. Cassandra's hand gripped William's wrist so hard his knuckles whitened. The judge dismissed their claims, at least for now. But I knew this was only the beginning. That night, I returned to the gallery, thinking I'd finally have some peace. But instead, I found the front window smashed, shards of glass glittering on the floor like ice. Nothing was stolen, nothing touched, just destroyed. A message. I sank to my knees, shaking as I picked up the pieces. My phone buzzed, and when I looked, there was a single text from an unknown number: "You don't belong here." I didn't need to guess who sent it. Cassandra wasn't just trying to beat me in court. She wanted to break me. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything. Rumors spread online about me being an addict, unstable, in over my head. Anonymous comments on local art blogs called me a fraud, claiming I'd only gotten the gallery because I'd manipulated an old man. Invitations I'd sent to potential investors mysteriously went missing. Even one of my painters backed out at the last minute, spooked by the noise. Every time something fell apart, I heard Cassandra's voice in my head, hissing, "You'll fail. And when you do, I'll be there to take it all." But here's the thing. Every time she tried to push me down, I got back up. Because for the first time, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for myself. And the more they tried to crush me, the more determined I became. One night, just after another meeting with my attorney, I sat alone in the gallery, staring at one of my own paintings my grandfather had collected years before I even knew. Bold strokes of crimson and gold, a storm and a sunrise all tangled together. I thought of him, of my grandmother too, though I never met her. And suddenly I knew this wasn't just about inheritance. This was about legacy, about carrying forward what they had seen in me when no one else did. So when the second court date came, I walked into that courtroom with my head high, wearing the emerald scarf my grandmother had once painted in a portrait. Cassandra's smirk faltered for the first time when she saw me. I wasn't there as the overlooked daughter anymore. I was there as the rightful heir to my grandfather's vision, and I wasn't backing down. The last hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. By then, months of battles had taken their toll on me. I was tired, thinner, maybe even hardened, but I was no longer afraid. The gallery had survived the broken window. The rumors, even the investors who'd pulled out. Slowly, I'd built something solid. Shows that drew real crowds, young artists who trusted me, collectors who admired the vision. Even the local paper had called the Bennett Gallery a rising star in Boston's cultural scene. And still, my family circled like vultures, waiting for me to slip. That morning, when I stepped into the courtroom, I felt every eye turned toward me. Cassandra looked wholesome, as always, her hair pinned perfectly, her heels clicking like gunshots. My parents sat tall beside her, united in their disapproval. But this time, I wasn't alone. A group of young artists I'd supported over the past months had shown up, sitting quietly in the back row. My attorney leaned over and whispered, "They're here for you. Don't forget that." The proceedings began. Cassandra's lawyer argued that the gallery was too unstable, that I lacked the experience to manage such a significant inheritance, that transferring it to Cassandra would protect the Bennett legacy. I wanted to laugh. Protect the legacy? From me. When it was our turn, my attorney stood and calmly unfolded a series of exhibits. Attendance records from the gallery, articles praising its impact, financial reports showing not only stability but growth. And then this was the blow that made Cassandra's face finally crack. He played a video message my grandfather had recorded 2 years before his death. On the screen, Richard Bennett appeared older but sharp-eyed. His voice was steady, deliberate. To my granddaughter, Sophia, if you're watching this, it means the battles I feared have come to pass. Let me make it plain. I chose you not because you're the loudest, not because you followed a script, but because you dared to be different. This gallery, this collection, it is yours. Not Cassandra's, not your parents', yours. And if they challenge you, show them this. I built an empire once, and I see in you the same fire to build something greater. You are my legacy. The room was silent, my mother's face drained of color. My father looked like someone had ripped the ground out from under him. Cassandra sat frozen, eyes blazing, but I could see her knuckles trembling where she gripped the table. The judge cleared his throat and said simply, "I think that resolves the matter." Case dismissed. I'd won. But it didn't feel like victory in that moment. It felt like release. Cassandra stormed out without looking at me, her heels stabbing the floor. My parents followed, stiff and silent. I stayed seated, shaking, my grandfather's words still echoing in my ears. Later that night, the gallery held its biggest opening yet. Crowds spilled onto the sidewalk. Music filled the air, and for the first time, I felt alive in the center of it all. The young artists I'd mentored were there, glowing with pride. Julia raised a glass in my direction and whispered, "He'd be proud." And then, just when I thought the night couldn't hold any more surprises, I saw Cassandra standing at the edge of the room, not dressed like the polished queen she always was, but in something simple. Her eyes were darker, tired. She walked up slowly, stopping in front of one of my grandmother's restored watercolors. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. I didn't answer. She turned to me, her voice unsteady. "I lost, didn't I?" I met her eyes. It was never a competition. "You just thought it was." For the first time, she looked small, human, and maybe that was punishment enough. She left before the night ended, slipping away into the shadows, and I let her go. Because the truth is, This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom, about finally stepping into the life my grandparents had wanted for me. Months later, the gallery was thriving. We launched scholarships, funded new artists, and opened doors for people who had been overlooked. People like me. Every morning, I touched the plaque at the entrance that bore my grandmother's name and whispered, "Thank you." And every night, as I locked the gallery doors, I smiled to myself. I had once been the forgotten daughter, the disappointment, but now I was Sophia Ben, and I was my grandfather's legacy. Thank you for listening.